Hello and welcome back to Baby Elias' stories. We now return to Pinocchio by C. Collodi. Chapter 15. The assassins hang Pinocchio to the big oak tree. At this sight, the puppet's courage failed him, and he was on the point of throwing himself on the ground and giving himself over for lost. Turning, however, his eyes in every direction, he saw at some distance a small house as white as snow. "If only I had breath to reach that house," he said to himself. "Perhaps I should be saved." And without delaying an instant, he recommenced running for his life through the wood, and the assassins after him. At last, after a desperate race of nearly 2 hours, he arrived quite breathless at the door of the house and knocked. No one answered. He knocked again with great violence, for he heard the sound of steps approaching him and the heavy panting of his persecutors. The same silence. Seeing that the knocking was useless, he began in desperation to kick and pummel the door with all his might. The window then opened, and a beautiful child appeared at it. She had blue hair and a face as white as a waxen image. Her eyes were closed and her hands were crossed on her breast. Without moving her lips in the least, she said in a voice that seemed to come from the other world, "In this house there is no one. They are all dead." "Then at least open the door for me yourself," shouted Pinocchio, crying and imploring. "I am dead also." "Dead? Then what are you doing there at the window?" "I am waiting for the bear to come to carry me away." Having said this, she immediately disappeared, and the window was closed again without the slightest noise. "Oh, beautiful child with blue hair!" cried Pinocchio. "Open the door for pity's sake! Have compassion on a poor boy pursued by assassins!" But he could not finish the word, for he felt himself seized by the collar, and the same 2 horrible voices said to him threateningly, "You shall not escape from us again." The puppet, seeing death staring him in the face, was taken with such a violent fit of trembling that the joints of his wooden legs began to creak, and the sovereigns hidden under his tongue to clink. "Now then," demanded the assassins, "will you open your mouth? Yes or no?" "Ah, no answer. Leave it to us. This time we will force you to open it." And drawing out 2 long, horrid knives as sharp as razors, clash! They attempted to stab him twice. The puppet, luckily for him, was made of very hard wood. The knives therefore broke into 1,000 pieces, and the assassins were left with the handles in their hands, staring at each other. "I see what we must do," said one of them. "He must be hung. Let us hang him." "Let us hang him," repeated the other. Without loss of time, they tied his arms behind him, passing a running noose round his throat, and hung him to the branch of a tree called the big oak. Then they sat down on the grass and waited for his last struggle. But at the end of 3 hours, the puppet's eyes were still open. His mouth closed, and he was kicking more than ever. Losing patience, they turned to Pinocchio and said in a bantering tone, "Goodbye till tomorrow. Let us hope that when we return, you will be polite enough to allow yourself to be found quite dead, and with your mouth wide open." And they walked off. In the meantime, a tempestuous northerly wind began to blow and roar angrily, and it beat the poor puppet from side to side, making him swing violently, like the clatter of a bell ringing for a wedding. And the swinging gave him atrocious spasms, and the running noose, becoming still tighter round his throat, took away his breath. Little by little, his eyes began to grow dim. But although he felt that death was near, he still continued to hope that some charitable person would come to his assistance before it was too late. But when, after waiting and waiting, he found that no one came, absolutely no one, then he remembered his poor father, and, thinking he was dying, he stammered out, "Oh, Papa! Papa! If only you were here!" His breath failed him, and he could say no more. He shut his eyes, opened his mouth, stretched his legs, gave a long shudder, and hung stiff and insensible. Chapter 16. The beautiful child rescues the puppet. While poor Pinocchio, suspended to a branch of the big oak, was apparently more dead than alive, the beautiful child with the blue hair came again to the window. When she saw the unhappy puppet hanging by his throat and dancing up and down in the gusts of the north wind, she was moved by compassion. Striking her hands together, she gave 3 little claps. At this signal, there came a sound of the sweep of wings flying rapidly, and a large falcon flew onto the window sill. "What are your orders, gracious fairy?" he asked, inclining his beak in sign of reverence. "Do you see that puppet dangling from a branch of the big oak?" "I see him." "Very well. Fly there at once. With your strong beak, break the knot that keeps him suspended in the air, and lay him gently on the grass at the foot of the tree." The falcon flew away, and after 2 minutes he returned, saying, "I have done as you commanded." "And how did you find him?" "To see him, he appeared dead, but he cannot really be quite dead, for I had no sooner loosened the running noose that tightened his throat than, giving a sigh, he muttered in a faint voice, 'Now I feel better.'" The fairy then struck her hands together twice, and a magnificent poodle appeared, walking upright on his hind legs exactly as if he had been a man. He was in the full dress livery of a coachman. On his head he had a three-cornered cap braided with gold. His curly white wig came down onto his shoulders. He had a chocolate-colored waistcoat with diamond buttons and two large pockets to contain the bones that his mistress gave him at dinner. He had, besides, a pair of short crimson velvet breeches, silk stockings, cut-down shoes, and hanging behind him a species of umbrella case made of blue satin to put his tail into when the weather was rainy. "Be quick, Meadow, like a good dog," said the fairy to the poodle. "Have the most beautiful carriage in my coach house harnessed, and take the road to the wood. When you come to the big oak, you will find a poor puppet stretched on the grass, half dead. Pick him up gently and lay him flat on the cushions of the carriage, and bring him here to me. Do you understand?" The poodle, to show that he had understood, shook the case of blue satin 3 or 4 times and ran off like a racehorse. Shortly afterwards, a beautiful little carriage came out of the coach house. The cushions were stuffed with canary feathers, and it was lined on the inside with whipped cream, custard, and vanilla wafers. The little carriage was drawn by 100 pairs of white mice, and the poodle, seated on the coach box, cracked his whip from side to side like a driver when he is afraid that he is behind time. Scarcely had a quarter of an hour passed when the carriage returned. The fairy, who was waiting at the door of the house, took the poor puppet in her arms and carried him into a little room that was wainscoted with mother of pearl. She sent at once to summon the most famous doctors in the neighborhood. They came immediately after the other, namely a crow, an owl, and the talking cricket. "I wish to know from you, gentlemen," said the fairy, "if this unfortunate puppet is alive or dead." At this request, the crow, advancing first, felt Pinocchio's pulse. He then felt his nose, and then the little toe of his foot. And having done this carefully, he pronounced solemnly the following words: "Caw! To my belief, the puppet is already quite dead. But if unfortunately he should not be dead, then it would be a sign that he is still alive. Caw-caw!" "Oh, I regret," said the owl, "to be obliged to contradict the crow, my illustrious friend and colleague. But, in my opinion, the puppet is still alive. But, if unfortunately he should not be alive, then it would be a sign that he is dead indeed. Hoo-hoo!" "And you, have you nothing to say?" asked the fairy of the talking cricket. "In my opinion, the wisest thing a prudent doctor can do when he does not know what he is talking about is to be silent. For the rest, that puppet there has a face that is not new to me. I have known him for some time." Pinocchio, who up to that moment had lain immovable like a real piece of wood, was seized with a fit of convulsive trembling that shook the whole bed. That puppet there," continued the talking cricket, "is a confirmed rogue." Pinocchio opened his eyes, but shut them again immediately. "He is a ragamuffin, a do-nothing, a vagabond." Pinocchio hid his face beneath the clothes. "That puppet there is a disobedient son who will make his poor father die of a broken heart." At that instant, a suffocated sound of sobs and crying was heard in the room. Imagine everybody's astonishment when, having raised the sheets a little, it was discovered that the sounds came from Pinocchio. "Caw! When a dead person cries, it is a sign that he is on the road to get well," said the crow solemnly. "Oh, I grieve to contradict my illustrious friend and colleague," added the owl. "But for me, when the person cries, it is a sign that he is sorry to die." Hoo! Chapter 17. Pinocchio will not take his medicine. As soon as the three doctors had left the room, the fairy approached Pinocchio, and, having touched his forehead, she perceived that he was in a high fever. She therefore dissolved a certain white powder in half a tumbler of water, and, offering it to the puppet, she said to him lovingly, "Drink it, and in a few days you will be cured." Pinocchio looked at the tumbler, made a wry face, and then asked in a plaintive voice, "Is it sweet or bitter?" "It is bitter, but it will do you good." "If it is bitter, I will not take it." "Listen to me. Drink it." "I don't like anything bitter." "Drink it, and when you have drunk it, I will give you a lump of sugar to take away the taste." "Where is the lump of sugar?" "Here it is," said the fairy, taking a piece from a gold sugar basin. "Give me first the lump of sugar, and then I will drink that bad bitter water." "Do you promise me?" "Yes." The fairy gave him the sugar, and Pinocchio, having crunched it up and swallowed it in a second, said, licking his lips, "It would be a fine thing if sugar were medicine. I would take it every day." "Now keep your promise and drink these few drops of water, which will restore you to health." Pinocchio took the tumbler unwillingly in his hand and put the point of his nose to it. He then approached it to his lips. He then again put his nose to it, and at last said, "It is too bitter, too bitter. I cannot drink it." "How can you tell that when you have not even tasted it?" "I can imagine it. I know it from the smell. I want first another lump of sugar, and then I will drink it." The fairy then, with all the patience of a good mamma, put another lump of sugar in his mouth, and again presented the tumbler to him. "I cannot drink it so," said the puppet, making 1,000 grimaces. "Why?" "Because that pillow that is down there on my feet bothers me." The fairy removed the pillow. It is useless. Even so, I cannot drink it. What is the matter now? The door of the room, which is half open, bothers me. The fairy went and closed the door. In short, cried Pinocchio, bursting into tears, I will not drink that bitter water. No, no, no. My boy, you will repent it. I don't care. Your illness is serious. I don't care. The fever in a few hours will carry you into the other world. I don't care. Are you not afraid of death? I am not in the least afraid. I would rather die than drink that bitter medicine. At that moment, the door of the room flew open, and 4 rabbits as black as ink entered, carrying on their shoulders a little bear. What do you want with me? Cried Pinocchio, sitting up in bed in a great fright. We have come to take you, said the biggest rabbit. To take me? But I am not yet dead. No, not yet. But you have only a few minutes to live, as you have refused the medicine that would have cured you of the fever. Oh, fairy, fairy, the puppet began to scream. Give me the tumbler at once. Be quick, for pity's sake, for I will not die. No, I will not die. And taking the tumbler in both hands, he emptied it at a gulp. We must have patience, said the rabbits. This time we have made our journey in vain. And taking the little bear again on their shoulders, they left the room, grumbling and murmuring between their teeth. In fact, a few minutes afterwards, Pinocchio jumped down from the bed quite well, because wooden puppets have the privilege of being seldom ill and of being cured very quickly. The fairy, seeing him running and rushing about the room as gay and as lively as a young cock, said to him, Then my medicine has really done you good? Good! I should think so! It has restored me to life! Then why on earth did you require so much persuasion to take it? Because you see that we boys are all like that. We are more afraid of medicine than of the illness. Disgraceful! Boys ought to know that a good remedy taken in time may save them from a serious illness, and perhaps even from death. Oh, but another time I shall not require so much persuasion. I shall remember those black rabbits with the bear on their shoulders, and then I shall immediately take the tumbler in my hand, and down it will go. Now come here to me and tell me how it came about that you fell into the hands of those assassins. You see, the showman, Fire Eater, gave me some gold pieces and said to me, Go and take them to your father. And instead I met on the road a fox and a cat, who said to me, Would you like those pieces of gold to become 1,000 or 2? Come with us, and we will take you to the field of miracles. And I said, Let us go. And they said, Let us stop at the inn of the Red Crowfish. And after midnight they left. And when I awoke, I found that they were no longer there, because they had gone away. Then I began to travel by night, for you cannot imagine how dark it was, and on that account I met on the road 2 assassins in charcoal sacks who said to me, 'Out with your money!' And I said to them, 'I have got none, because I have hidden the 4 gold pieces in my mouth.' And one of the assassins tried to put his hand in my mouth, and I bit his hand off and spat it out. But instead of a hand, it was a cat's paw. And the assassins ran after me, and I ran and ran, until at last they caught me and tied me by the neck to a tree in this wood, and said to me, 'Tomorrow we shall return here, and then you will be dead with your mouth open, and we shall be able to carry off the pieces of gold that you have hidden under your tongue.' 'And the 4 pieces, where have you put them?' asked the fairy. 'I have lost them,' said Pinocchio. But he was telling a lie, for he had them in his pocket. He had scarcely told the lie when his nose, which was already long, grew at once 2 inches longer. 'And where did you lose them?' 'In the wood near here.' At this second lie, his nose went on growing. 'If you have lost them in the wood near here,' said the fairy, 'we will look for them, and we shall find them, because everything that is lost in that wood is always found.' 'Ah, now I remember all about it,' replied the puppet, getting quite confused. 'I didn't lose the 4 gold pieces. I swallowed them whilst I was drinking your medicine.' At this lie, his nose grew to such an extraordinary length that poor Pinocchio could not move in any direction. If he turned to one side, he struck his nose against the bed or the window panes. If he turned to the other, he struck it against the walls or the door. If he raised his head a little, he ran the risk of sticking it into one of the fairy's eyes. And the fairy looked at him and laughed. "Why are you laughing at? What are you laughing at?" asked the puppet, very confused and anxious at finding his nose growing so prodigiously. "I am laughing at the lie you have told. And how can you possibly know that I have told a lie?" "Lies, my dear boy, are found out immediately, because they are of 2 sorts. They are lies that have short legs. There are lies that have shorter legs, and lies that have long noses. Your lie, as it happens, is one of those that have a long nose." Pinocchio, not knowing where to hide himself for shame, tried to run out of the room. But he did not succeed, for his nose had increased so much that it could no longer pass through the door. Chapter 18. Pinocchio again meets the fox and the cat. The fairy allowed the puppet to cry for a good half-hour over his nose, which could no longer pass through the door of the room. This she did to give him a severe lesson, and to correct him of the disgraceful fault of telling lies, the most disgraceful fault that a boy can have. But when she saw him quite disfigured, and his eyes swollen out of his head from weeping, she felt full of compassion for him. She therefore beat her hands together and at that signal 1,000 large birds called woodpeckers flew in at the window. They immediately perched on Pinocchio's nose and began to peck at it with such zeal that in a few minutes his enormous and ridiculous nose was reduced to its usual dimensions.
"What a good fairy you are!"
said the puppet, drying his eyes.
"And how much I love you!"
"I love you also," answered the fairy, "and if you will remain with me, you shall be my little brother, and I will be your good little sister."
"I would remain willingly if it were not for my poor papa."
"I have thought of everything. I have already let your father know, and he will be here tonight."
"Really?"
shouted Pinocchio, jumping for joy.
"Then, little fairy, if you consent, I should like to go and meet him. I am so anxious to give a kiss to that poor old man who has suffered so much on my account that I am counting the minutes."
"Go then, but be careful not to lose yourself. Take the road through the wood, and I am sure that you will meet him." Pinocchio set out, and as soon as he was in the wood, he began to run like a kid. But when he had reached a certain spot, almost in front of the big oak, he stopped, because he thought he heard people amongst the bushes. In fact, 2 persons came out onto the road. Can you guess who they were? His 2 traveling companions, the fox and the cat, with whom he had supped at the inn of the Red Crawfish. "Why, here is our dear Pinocchio!" cried the fox, kissing and embracing him. "How came you to be here?" "How come you to be here?" repeated the cat.
"It is a long story,"
answered the puppet,
"which I will tell you when I have time. But do you know that the other night when you left me alone at the inn, I met with assassins on the road?"
"Assassins? Oh, poor Pinocchio!
"And what did they want?" "They wanted to rob me of my gold pieces."
"Villains!" said the fox. "Infamous villains!" repeated the cat.
"But I ran away from them,"
continued the puppet,
"and they followed me, and at last they overtook me and hung me to a branch of that oak tree."
And Pinocchio pointed to the big oak which was 2 steps from them. "Is it possible to hear of anything more dreadful?" said the fox. "In what a world we are condemned to live! Where can respectable people like us find a safe refuge?" Whilst they were thus talking, Pinocchio observed that the cat was lame of her front right leg, for in fact she had lost her paw with all its claws. He therefore asked her,
"What have you done with your paw?"
The cat tried to answer, but became confused. Therefore the fox said immediately, "My friend is too modest, and that is why she doesn't speak. I will answer for her. I must tell you that an hour ago we met an old wolf on the road, almost fainting from want of food, who asked alms of us. Not having so much as a fish bone to give him, what did my friend, who has really the heart of a Caesar, too. She bit off one of her 4 paws and threw it to that poor beast that he might appease his hunger. And the fox, in relating this, dried a tear. Pinocchio was also touched, and approaching the cat, he whispered into her ear, "If all cats resembled you, how fortunate the mice would be!" "And now, what are you doing here?" asked the fox of the puppet.
I am waiting for my papa, whom I expect to arrive every moment."
"And your gold pieces?"
I have got them in my pocket, all but one that I spent at the Inn of the Red Crawfish.
"And to think that instead of 4 pieces by tomorrow they might become 1 or 2,000. Why do you not listen to my advice? Why will you not go and bury them in the field of miracles?"
Today it is impossible. I will go another day."
"Another day it will be too late," said the fox.
"Why?"
"Because the field has been bought by a gentleman, and after tomorrow no one will be allowed to bury money there."
"How far off is the field of miracles?"
"Not 2 miles. Will you come with us? In half an hour you will be there. You can bury your money at once, and in a few minutes you will collect 2,000, and this evening you will return with your pockets full. Will you come with us?" Pinocchio thought of the good fairy, old Geppetto, and the warnings of the talking cricket, and he hesitated a little before answering. He ended, however, by doing as all boys do who have not a grain of sense and who have no heart. He ended by giving his head a little shake and saying to the fox and the cat,
"Let us go! I will come with you!"
And they went. After having walked half the day, they reached a town that was called Trap for Blockheads. As soon as Pinocchio entered this town, he saw that the streets were crowded with dogs who were yawning from hunger, shorn sheep trembling with cold, cocks without combs begging for a grain of Indian corn, large butterflies that could no longer fly because they had sold their beautiful colored wings, peacocks which had no tails and were ashamed to be seen, and pheasants that went scratching about in a subdued fashion, mourning for their brilliant gold and silver feathers, gone forever. In the midst of this crowd of beggars and shamefaced creatures, some lordly carriage passed from time to time, containing a fox or a thieving magpie or some other ravenous bird of prey.
"And where is the field of miracles?"
asked Pinocchio. "It is here, not 2 steps from us." They crossed the town, and having gone beyond the walls, they came to a solitary field. "Here we are," said the fox to the puppet. "Now stoop down and dig with your hands a little hole in the ground and put your gold pieces into it." Pinocchio obeyed. He dug a hole, put into it the 4 gold pieces that he had left, and then filled up the hole with a little earth. "Now then," said the fox, "go to that canal close to us. Fetch a can of water and water the ground where you have sowed them." Pinocchio went to the canal, and as he had no can, he took off one of his old shoes, and filling it with water, he watered the ground over the hole. He then asked,
Is there anything else to be done?
Nothing else, answered the fox. We can now go away. You can return in about 20 minutes, and you will find the shrub already pushing through the ground, with its branches quite loaded with money. The poor puppet, beside himself with joy, thanked the fox and the cat 1,000 times and promised them a beautiful present. We wish for no presents, answered the two rascals. It is enough for us to have taught you the way to enrich yourself without undergoing hard work, and we are as happy as a people out for a holiday. Thus saying, they took leave of Pinocchio and, wishing him a good harvest, went about their business. Chapter 19. Pinocchio is robbed of his money. The puppet returned to the town and began to count the minutes, one by one. And when he thought that it must be time, he took the road leading to the field of miracles. And as he walked along with hurried steps, his heart beat fast. Tick-tock, tick-tock, like a drawing room clock when it is really going well. Meanwhile, he was thinking to himself, and if, instead of 1,000 gold pieces, I were to find on the branches of the tree 2,000, and instead of 2,000, supposing I found 5,000, and instead of 5,000, that I found 100,000? Oh, what a fine gentleman I should then become! I would have a beautiful palace, 1,000 little wooden horses, and 1,000 stables to amuse myself with, a cellar full of currant wine and sweet syrups, and a library quite full of candies, tarts, plum cakes, macaroons, and biscuits with cream. Whilst he was building these castles in the air, he had arrived in the neighborhood of the field, and he stopped to look about for a tree with its branches laden with money, but he saw nothing. He advanced another 100 steps. Nothing. He entered the field and went right up to the little hole where he had buried his sovereigns, and nothing. He then became very thoughtful, and forgetting the rules of society and good manners, he took his hands out of his pocket and gave his head a long scratch. At that moment, he heard an explosion of laughter close to him, and, looking up, he saw a large parrot perched on a tree who was pruning the few feathers he had left. "Why are you laughing?" asked Pinocchio in an angry voice. "I am laughing because in pruning my feathers I tickled myself under my wings." The puppet did not answer, but went to the canal and, filling the same old shoe full of water, he proceeded to water the earth afresh that covered his gold pieces. While he was thus occupied, another laugh, still more impertinent than the first, rang out in the silence of that solitary place. "Once for all," shouted Pinocchio in a rage, "may I know, you ill-educated parrot, what you are laughing at?" I am laughing at those simpletons who believe in all the foolish things that are told them, and who allow themselves to be entrapped by those who are more cunning than they are.
Are you perhaps speaking of me?
Yes, I am speaking of you, poor Pinocchio, of you who are simple enough to believe that money can be sown and gathered in fields in the same way as beans and gourds. I also believe it once, and today I am suffering for it. I also believed it once, and today I am suffering for it. Today, but it is too late. I have at last learned that to put a few pennies honestly together, it is necessary to know how to earn them, either by the work of our own hands or by the cleverness of our own brains.
I don't understand you,
said the puppet, who was already trembling with fear. Have patience! I will explain myself better, rejoined the parrot. You must know then that while you were in the town, the fox and the cat returned to the field. They took the buried money and then fled like the wind. And now he that catches them will be clever. Pinocchio remained with his mouth open, and not choosing to believe the parrot's words, he began with his hands and nails to dig up the earth that he had watered. And he dug and dug and dug and made such a deep hole that a rick of a straw might have stood upright in it, but the money was no longer there. He rushed back to the town in a state of desperation, and went at once to the courts of justice to denounce the two knaves who had robbed him to the judge. The judge was a big ape of the gorilla tribe, an old ape, respectable for his age. He's a white beard, but especially for his gold spectacles, without glasses that he was always obliged to wear on account of an inflammation of the eyes that had tormented him for many years. Pinocchio related in the presence of the judge all the particulars of the infamous fraud of which he had been the victim. He gave the names, the surnames, and other details of the two rascals, and ended by demanding justice. The judge listened with great benignity. Kindness or tolerance toward others. Benignity. The judge listened with great benignity, took a lively interest in the story, was much touched and moved, and when the puppet had nothing further to say, he stretched out his hand and rang a bell. Cling, 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 cling. At this summons, two mastiffs immediately appeared, dressed as gendarmes. Gendarmes. Gendarme, an armed police officer in France and other French-speaking countries. Gendarme. At this summons, two mastiffs immediately appeared, dressed as gendarmes. The judge then, pointing to Pinocchio, said to them, "That poor devil has been robbed of 4 gold pieces. Take him away and put him immediately into prison." The puppet was petrified on hearing this unexpected sentence and tried to protest, but the gendarmes, to avoid losing time, stopped his mouth and carried him off to the lockup. And there he remained for 4 months, 4 long months, and he would have remained longer still if a fortunate chance had not released him. The young emperor, who reigned over the town of Trap for Blockheads, having won a splendid victory over his enemies, ordered great public rejoicings. There were illuminations, fireworks, horse races, and velocipede races.
Velocipede.
Velocipede, an early form of bicycle propelled by working pedals on cranks fitted to the front axle. Velocipede. There were illuminations, fireworks, horse races, and velocipede races. And as a further sign of triumph, he commanded that the prisons should be opened and all the prisoners freed.
If the others are to be let out of prison, I will go also,
said Pinocchio to the jailer. No, not you, said the jailer, because you do not belong to the fortunate class.
I beg your pardon,
replied Pinocchio.
I am also a criminal.
In that case, you are perfectly right, said the jailer, and taking off his hat and bowing to him respectfully, he opened the prison doors and let him escape.